All right, it's go time. We rocking and rolling. I'm really just freewheeling it tonight. I agree with you here. I agree with Neil. One plan is you can invite T-Grog tonight. T-Grog, if you watch, you are invited. I've already tried to contact you in the comments. So, done. That's done. Brosif. Let's see. What do we got? What's up, Teo? Nothing like hot coffee in the grip of existential finality. Existential finality. Man alive. All right, let's start ripping some woo. I didn't even know I was just saying that, but let's start ripping some woo. Iced coffee. Tunji? How do we say this? Tunji? Tune guy? Tune guy. Iced coffee. What's up, Abby? Haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. All right. I think what I'd like to talk about is woohoo. You like yoo-hoo? Yoo-hoo. The first was right. Tunji. Cool. Got it. Tunji. What up, Chadrick? So I was listening to PVK's Homeroom this morning. I haven't gotten my whole way through it, but man, it's good stuff, man. So he's talking about what's the title of it? The Tale of Two Jordans or something like that. I don't know. Somebody was commenting on, and the Tale of Two Jordans, Religious Transformation, Hall and Peterson. So there's a couple ways we could take this, and by we I mean I, and by I mean the person I, which is the we. It's the royal we. Is initially. It's interesting because Paul has been taking a little bit more of a deep dive into Jordan and his conversion. And I'm not really that familiar with Jordan Hall's work. You know, I've only heard of him tangentially and heard of him associated with Vervaeke. And I haven't taken the deep personal dive into Jordan's work to really understand him, to know him as I am known. You know, that deep personalist knowing that I like to riff on from 1 Corinthians 8. Because that takes initiation, right? To know anyone in a personalist way, you need to be initiated. And so there's a couple ways we could talk about it. Is he in this conversation? Man, he made a quote recently that I really like. But Jordan, in the way that he talks about all the different clips that Paul played, taken in total, taken cumulatively, man, I love. Jordan gets it. And he also said, I was sharing this with McMosif. I don't know if he's in here. Like Jordan lives down there close-ish to McMo, somewhere in those Appalachian Mountains, or the Smokies or somewhere down there, Blue Ridge Mountains maybe. And he's going to a church that he says allows him to conversationally have discussions in this church of like 150 people, because he's talking about the Dunbar number, of like different conceptions of the Trinity, like even Eastern versus Western conceptions of the Trinity, which would be like egalitarian versus monarchical Trinitarianism. But you know, there's some nuance to that, and you have to understand a lot of church history. It's obviously a complicated conversation, as you can see from a lot of the conversations with Sam Tiedemann, my boy. Also, Sam, come get in here. Here we go. I'm putting it out there. You get ready for the woo. Morphic field, Sam, telepathy. I need a crystal. Somebody give me some crystals. However, I was talking to my boy Neil, who Neil is in here. And I was saying I have this weird intuitive sense sometimes where, you know, and whatever, pardon the Christian language. If you don't like it, just ignore it. But God will put someone on my heart sometimes, like someone's name, or somebody will just keep popping up into my mind throughout the day. randomly, and it can be somebody that like I've not spoken to in months or years, even sometimes, and for some reason they're on my mind, and I don't consider that to be arbitrary. I don't really think anything is arbitrary, and so then I've made the practice over the last, I don't know how long this has been, 10 years or so, something. It's been a while. Where then I'll reach out to that person. I'll just be like, "You're on my mind. Like, how are you doing? Are you okay?" Or just say, "Thinking of you," you know? And I don't know. I found it to be there's an unbelievable amount of synchronicities. Like, I would say, I don't know, borderline all of the time, there's some reason I was needing to contact them. You know, I don't know what that is besides that I just think the whole world is connected. And I think this kind of gets into what I was talking to a little bit yesterday about, like, minds and being like a radio or a TV and being attuned to the right channel. I do think if you are attuned and integrated in the right way, and you know, uh and I'm not saying I am fully, but in some ways, if you're attuned, and I'm just a very relationally attuned person. I'm highly relational, that you you know things that you could not know in a very, for example, like Jesus. Jesus is a great example. I'm not trying to compare myself to Jesus. I think everyone has these abilities a little bit in different ways. They may be latent capacities, but people have them. So like Jesus with the woman at the well, and Jesus always, like, how did Jesus know all sorts of things that he knew? You could say, well, he's God, so he's omniscient. He just knows all things. I think he was tuned in. You know, I think greater things than these you will do. I don't think that these are capacities that human beings aren't capable of, because Jesus was a human being. So, yeah, totally. You get it, Abby. It's nice. It's always nice. Why not reach out to someone? I'll just put that out there as an encouragement to anyone. If you're thinking about someone, reach out to them. Maybe even give them a call, like old school style. You know, or you could just do a text, you know, send them a voice message or something. It's my style. Yeah, exactly, Neil. And this is what I say. He prayed every morning. He was tapped in, you know. He was tapped into the crystal of all crystals. Uh, you know, God the Father. Um, so anyhow, Jordan, and I said this in a comment, Jordan Hall. I have no idea how connected he is to the little corner, and I'm sure he's busy with his family and his life and all these conversations. He even mentioned that all these people that have reached out to him, and he's trying to discern his vocation and what his calling is to be now that he's a Christian, how he's meant to serve the body. And I don't know. I just think he's thinking about it all in a really great way from those limited clips that I heard from PBK. And then one place, I don't know, it's maybe quartz. It's like the same crystals. It's not, well, like 2 degree. It's like the crystals that are in the Superman's palace, like his palace of solitude or whatever. Like, as those crystals are above our crystals, the crystal that Jesus rubbed and prayed to when he prayed to God the Father is even above those crystals. Yeah, it's intense. So I was thinking of intense puns. So then there was a comment in there that Eric said, I guess I will say this because it's a riff on the personalist knowing thing. I truly think it's probably like the most. So at 40:37 in PBK's video, Eric Weinstein started playing clips of Eric Weinstein and Chris Williamson. And they're having, I don't know, I like Eric a lot. I think he's pretty cool in a lot of ways. And Chris asks some good questions. I see every once in a while he has I don't know if they're genuine or if they're learned or both, little conversational tricks where, like, he'll say things, or like he was on Rogan and he'll say a lot like, I want to teach you something. I want to teach you something, which, like, that's cool, I guess, and it's fine. But like, after you say it 3 or 4 times, it becomes like, it pops out to me. But then he'll say things like, what do you mean by that? Or go into that, or whatever. And everybody has these little tics, little social conversations anyhow. So at 40:37, Eric said, you have to have an organizing principle that scales. And he's talking about, he was riffing on the founders of America who said, we hold these truths to be self-evident. And so what he's saying is at some point you have to have belief that you just take, things that are just self-evident. And so he says implicit in that, these things aren't necessarily self-evident. What? I'm not on. I always live stream to both my channel and Rando's. You've probably only ever seen it on on. I'm not doing it on Rando's United, but you probably have only ever seen it on Grail Country. Anyhow, so he was riffing on that. We believe these truths to be self-evident, but he said there are some people that are just not going to think these things are self-evident, which is kind of like what Jordan Hall was talking about, the non-tyrannical wooing of God or of belief. Is like belief isn't tyrannical. And so like if you don't hold these things to be self-evident, you don't. So sorry. And then he goes on to say, this quote, which is I don't know, it just really popped out to me as like the antithesis of all of my personalist knowing. And this is, and I was saying to a couple friends this morning, this is where contradiction or tension or contrast or pushback or difference helps to go further up and further in and bring about clarity and deeper understanding of what you already know or what you don't know that you know, the fullness of knowledge. Because when Eric said that, I was like, okay, that's a clear articulation of what I don't think. And so he says, you have to have an organizing principle that scales. And I said, maybe the most succinct anti-personalist knowing sentence that I've ever heard. This is the delusion of rooting proper knowledge, or trying to, in the egoic intellect and principles versus persons, which involves faith and trust. If you're trying to root your knowledge in principles, you are always going to be trapped in a prison made of thoughts. I would argue, you're always going to be trapped. The left brain is always going to be the master. And because the only kind of knowing that I think has a proper harmony, I was talking with Neil and Chad about this, between right and left brain, where the corpus callosum is working properly, where you have two as one, where the right brain is the master. What the right brain as the master means, and Chad said this in a really good way that I think was more relational versus abstract. McGilchrist tends to talk about it in the abstract, is that what the right brain being the master is that you're open to seeing, as Sherry says, seeing the truth. Well, I say seeing the truth outside the truth you currently apprehend, or you have to want to know what you don't want to know, which is one of those Cohen things. You have to be open to seeing error and correction, which you can either, I think you can properly train, what would you call them? Your organ of perceiving, your nous, perhaps, to be open to the truth outside of the truth you currently apprehend. I think you can train that. You could call that just humility, or you could call that childlikeness. It's where it's what I mean by iconic thinking. It's where the movement between model and narrative and map and territory is fluid. You're like code switching. So it's almost like you're not even, I don't know, what would you call it? It's like you have a processor that's switching between the binary so quickly, or it's like calculus, that like the ones and zeros, the lines, the infinite lines just become a curve. It becomes flow. It becomes potency and act become one. Which I would argue, like Paul had a comment in there of like, because Eric was distinguishing between belief and not belief, which is very much my Polanyi quote. I'm going to talk about Polanyi. Is doubt and belief are ultimately equivalent. Doubt relies on a subterranean set of tacit belief in something else. So, in other words, doubt is belief. It's just implicit belief, or it's belief in not that. It's apophatic belief. The cataphatic is like, I believe this. The apophatic is, I don't believe that. I believe something else, but it's not that. That's doubt, but doubt is belief. And I think there is a further up and a further in the fullness of knowing, which I call iconic thinking, where it's not quite saintlyhood. I'm going to find the quote that Paul said about, Paul, you're always watching the sausage being made. I'm constantly making sausage. I don't know that I'm ever eating sausage. I'm just making it. What was the quote in here? You said there was this last PBK was great. Your homeroom was wonderful today. What was it? I'm just seeing other people's comments. Boring. Okay, the 50-minute mark. Do saints believe fully? Because you made some comment like Eric was talking about this, doubt, belief. I've never seen anyone who believes fully, like whether it's the atheist or whether it's the religion person. I've never seen any of them that believe fully, belief without doubt. Maybe this is doubting Thomas, I believe, help my unbelief. There it is. That's it. That's all of it. And so, but maybe saints get to the point where they no longer see by faith. They just see by sight. They just see. It's not faith in the invisible or faith in the things unseen. They just see it. They just see the thing behind the thing behind the thing. It's not this like invisible spiritual things. Maybe you can get to the point through holiness, not through the intellect, through obedience, through the let it be to me according to your word and not my will but your will, Christ in Gethsemane, who was made perfect by what he suffered. Maybe saints, through their voluntary willed suffering and self-death, maybe that's what sainthood is you get to the place where your eye is one, your eye is pure, and your whole body is full of light, and you just see. You are not double-minded, tossed to and fro by every wave of doctrine. You just see it. You're not deliberating the gnomic will and the natural will of Maximus. You're not choosing between this and that. You just see. And I've met people in my life who, I'm not saying I've met like a full-on saint, but I see people who just see. I've met people who can just see things. And it's, I don't know, it's something to behold. It's a real beautiful thing. So, let's see what else. T Grog, where are you? I don't see you in the comments. Grog, come Grog. Who was I trying to call? Sam? Maybe I can call T Grog. If I call T Grog with my wooey crystal, I'm summoning. Or if I start talking about Job, will Jess show up? Because I want to invite you to something, T Grog. I miss you. T Grog, I miss you. Come on. All right. Is that all I want to talk about before I put the link in, and then I'll look at some comments? Yeah, so I said, so do saints believe fully? There's no division. Their eye is pure. They have no double-mindedness. Integrity. They have integrity. The integrity of Job, perhaps. Who, Job almost had like proto-integrity at the beginning, like he was holy. Have you considered my servant Job? And then at the end, through his suffering, he saw more fully. Although he never let go of that initial integrity, initial integrity was transformed into more of its fullness, I would say. All right, I'm going to put out the invite because that's about all I got. I'm just winging it. I'm just slinging woo this morning like you wouldn't believe. And we'll see who wants to come in and play, and I will look at comments. Paul thinks I'm funny. Thank you. I accept that and acknowledge it. I appreciate it. Dancing. Chad, on principles versus personal knowing. Unless your primary principle is I'm probably wrong. I don't even know that you need that. That's almost, I mean, maybe. I like what you're pointing at a little bit, and I think that's better. That's a better fundamental principle. But even that is like you're still stuck in a principle, in a based principally mindset, versus because I think you can hold to ideas and models. You can have opinions, you can have models, you can have narratives, you can have your left-brained things. and hold them with conviction, maybe not absolute conviction, because absolute conviction is dogmatism. Is dogmatism. Coffee burps, excuse me. Is dogmatism and blindedness. That's where you can't see outside of a prison. You can't think your way out of a prison made of thought. That's the hyper left brainedness. But I think you need a personal orientation, like the way that you said it relationally is love. Because in your discussion with someone else, are you trying to agape their opinions into being? Are you trying to really seek to understand them? Are you self-emptying and dying to your own understanding and seeking to, I must diminish, I must decrease, they must increase, like John the Baptist? I think that's the proper way of being in the world. And it's a very hard way of being because Satan's a deceiver and Antichrist is very crafty. And so in your defense of the truth, you can be serving untruth. That's the Antichrist, my friend. Lance, you beautiful, beautiful man. Lance, you're here. I was talking to someone the other day. I was talking to Neil, and we were having a conversation about family of origin stuff. And I was telling him, and God bless my family for all their strengths and weaknesses. They basically parented me, and my family was my parents loved me through their fears of what I could turn out negatively. And so I didn't grow up with a lot of like affirmation. It was just like, don't do this, not that, all that. And I was saying that's one of the reasons I love this little corner is I get affirmed. And I was like, and Lance is just like the best at that. He gets it. He knows that I love to be affirmed. So every time I see you, not only do I selfishly love the affirmation, I also just like to see you. So,
well, I do affirm you, and I think you've really hit your stride with this because I know you've been communicating for a long time in these waters, right? This thing you're doing here, I think it's so good because a lot of people like to watch how you think and process things. They do, because I'll just speak for myself from some experience. Whenever you say I language in a therapy group, like you get to own it, no one can question it or whatever. So therapeutic. But I've always enjoyed seeing things through the way, and for you, it's very much seeing things like you talked about here, right? Seeing how you see things, but then how you're processing your way through that. I think that's really valuable. And I think one of the things that, and Chad brought this, you're wrong thing when I was thinking about the saints. One of the things that Evagrius Ponticus, he was talking about that, when you're starting to arrive, which is like, there isn't this way or that way. Like they just see the way. And that way could be like, it can cost you your life. Like literally you're going to do this thing and you could be dead. Doesn't matter. Like, it's just, you find yourself in this place where you're so in union with God's will or whatever, that it's just, there's no right or wrong. There just is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And then, but you can take this out of that and you can think like, so in 12-step programs, what you'll hear is they'll say, just do the next right thing. Right. And that's a simple way of just saying like, there is the right thing to do. And the next right thing sometimes can be the exact thing, like the very thing you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And the thing that can literally, and this is what's the crazy thing. Like if you do a pros cons list or whatever, there are a lot of things that will happen as you really start thinking about your life. Like the next right thing is to do the thing that might actually even put you in jail, for example.
Sure.
Like there are people that maybe have done something and they want to make an amend about it. But if they admit this thing, maybe they embezzled funds, right? If they admit this thing, they might have to go to jail, and they have a family. And a lot of people would say, whoa. Like, no one's going to know about this. You're forgiven by God. Don't worry about it. Don't put your family at jeopardy. And so, for example, here's the thing, the next right thing for one person might be to not say anything about it. And they can still be true and right and have their integrity. Or for someone, it might be, I'm going to go admit this thing and trust enough in God and everything else that because probably what would happen is it goes against your integrity, and that's the sort of thing that would just eat you alive or whatever. Yeah. And the next right thing for that person might be, well, you need to go admit to that embezzlement and accept whatever comes your way, jail, whatever, right? And so any rate, when you were talking about those things like that, to me, like that's what integrity is, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so here you go. Everybody's got their own bingo, Luke bingo, silence. When you were saying that, how your integral act is not and cannot be, because of your own particularity, the bounds and constraints of your own being in the world, it cannot be identical to someone else's, because we have to have some sort of faithfulness and fidelity that is harmonious, that isn't identical. Like we talk about all the time in the Grail country, Christianity isn't about identical replicationism, right? And so I love the example of silence. I had a buddy actually in my church because I talk about silence. I mean, believe it or not, I talk about all the same things in church that I talk about here all the time. But Silence is one of those books and movies. The movie's brilliant. The book is amazing, that I just love so much. And I really don't want to give it away, but the thing that I always talk about in it is the two priests in it, the way that they handle the persecution of Catholicism and their faith in this Shogun era Japanese culture. They go two different ways with it. Two things that seem completely antithetical. And my conviction, and this is something that a guy from my church just really didn't like, is that they were both faithful. They both had integrity in what they did. And I'm not going to say the difference, but they seem opposite. But here's the thing, like, this is also one of my Lukeisms. There's always a unity behind any distinction.
Mm-hmm. And here's the deal, and it's to me, it's less of the I love what Chad is talking about. I think it's less that I'm wrong versus the I don't know. Like that, to me, that's a different distinction. I think part of the humility into the mystery in the I don't know is different than realizing that I'm going to be wrong about everything. Right. And I know Chad, like that's one of Chad's things. And I get what he's like, I get the spirit of what he's sharing with it. And there's so much that I resonate with that thing, but I think there's a difference, in that. And then, so here's the other thing, like Paul pointed, he shared this thing. I could so see Luke going to jail for his convictions, wise or unwise, right? To the horror.
What's hilarious, Lance, quick before you do that, is like me and my wife watched A Hidden Life in theater because I'm such a like Terrence Malick fan that like when it came out in limited release, we were like 2 of the 6 people in the theater or whatever, because it ain't Marvel, and we weren't prepared. We had 1 Kleenex between us, which was not a wise idea. but we left the theater. And I think that was one of the things that was hardest for her, is she was just like, oh my, yeah, that's you. Like that would be you. Just like going to prison. But then to riff on the silence thing is like, I don't know. The place where I'm at, I don't know. I think there's a way, because silence, there's this line in Silence in the book. I don't know that it's in the movie. I don't think it's in the movie, actually. It's in the book. But this is why often the books are, I mean, the movie's brilliant. Scorsese did a great job, but where he says he dreamt of the main priest, Father Rodriguez, said he had this dream of the red martyrdom. Like there's this weird thing in Christianity where you can fetishize martyrdom and a dying for your faith. Like when I grew up dispensationalist, end time stuff, and they were like showing videos to me as a small child, which could be child abuse, of like guillotines and things, and like taking the mark of the beast and all that stuff. I don't know, that kind of stuff horrified me. But then like for most of my life, I really did have these weird fantasies about being a martyr, and I still kind of do. Like I still kind of say that stuff.
Well, so do I. So here's the things that I've been good about in my life. I'm good at the grand gestures.
Yeah, we're zealots.
Because first off, it's easy. See, the grand gesture is easy because it's in a moment, right?
Yeah. Oh,
and I'm
absolutely.
willing to give my life up. Like there's radical stuff. I mean, even leaving a legal career to then go try and be a house church pastor, seminary, and everything else. And I mean, that was wild. That's a massive trying to drop when I'm this this. Like he says, drop your net and follow me immediately. Like I read that stuff and I'm like, God, this isn't a one way or another deal, guys. You're all in or you're all out, right? Like I don't see this lukewarmness. And
Yeah, I'm not hot. I'm hot or cold, baby.
The toughest thing is to suffer the little thing day by day, right? That's where the true measure of a man or a woman comes into. But I think the backdrop, like even bringing up what Paul said, right? Which is, I laugh at, well, this is a great conversation. So wise or unwise? Well, the wise or unwise, like, see, that's where you can get into this worldly pros, cons, should you do it sort of world or whatever versus what's right is right. But what I think and what I say about A Hidden Life is that's the greatest love story that I've ever seen. And it was a love story because what happened was not only was he slowly working his way there, but they had to be in union in that decision.
Dude, the scene that just wrecks me, there's a few, but the scene where he's with his attorney and they're saying like, the war is almost over. Just sign it. Just be a medic. You don't even have to mean it. Just get out of prison. It's fine. And his wife comes. They bring his wife.
I've got chills.
I can't even talk about it really. Because that's the point where she has the same kind of horror that my wife would have, or that Chad was saying his wife would have. And he's just looking at her and he just says, I can't. And she gives him the peace. And it's just the most, oh God. It's like one of the best scenes I've ever seen. So good.
As one flesh, they both assented to the sacrifice, right? And the thing I love about this movie, like it was the back in the forth. And I think in that moment, what I love, and that's why I think it's one of the greatest love stories ever written, is watching the dynamic of those two who loved each other so much going through. And there was this, you could see it like in there, this vacillation where she was behind him, and God is what she loved was his integrity, but she also had these fears. But in the end, she knew in her heart too that this was the way, like this was the choice, like this was the next right thing, and she was willing to suffer with him through it. Like it was just so amazing. And so I do think, and particularly I think as married people, I think one of the wisdom steps, and one of the things like I've had to do, and I haven't done well at it, and I'm trying to do it right now, is can you die to yourself if you see this thing so clearly? And quite frankly, now, particularly if you have a confirmation that it's a calling or whatever, but your wife's not there yet, you can rush out ahead and do the thing, and it can seem noble. And you're like, I'm doing this for God, and I'm going to say, it's like, but if you rush out ahead and you don't come into that one flesh moment and take the time to see what that can come together, that it becomes, very difficult. And so I think, so for example, to go back to that sort of deal, like if you were going to make that decision so here's what your wife's going to have to know. I know someone like yourself, your integrity. So in those moments, like you don't make that decision on a whim. That's a conversation that affects the family and your wife. Those are things you have to come together on. It may take you a year or two to figure out what decision you're going to make, but at some point, that thing has to hopefully come together where in unison you're like, okay, this is the way we're going to go.
Yes. So I want to address a couple comments here with an illustration, right? So Phlebas is saying abandoning your families for convictions is the opposite of selfless. These aren't clear questions. Agreed. And then Paul is saying, should you divorce your wife for Jesus? Leave your children for Jesus? Marylander, humans have been successful sacrificing themselves for a long time. Yes. So all these things are true. There are aspects of truth in all these things. So I want to use an illustration. This may seem like flippant. It's not as grandiose as like martyrdom or something, but it's a point of personal, I would say personal growth for me, and a kind of martyrdom in something I like to talk about all the time is love does not insist on its own way, right? 1 Corinthians 13.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Part of that can be your own convictions. So your own belief, your own, and so COVID. So we had COVID, and we went through the COVID thing in our family, and I was never on board. I mean, in general, I'm a non-interventionist. I was never on board with the narrative. I was always in the place of agnosticism. I was just like, I don't know. I don't know about any of this, but it didn't feel right to me personally, right? But so it's a complicated decision. My wife was much more on the side of like, get vaccinations, and part of it was part of the practical aspect of it is we were going to go on, and like, I'm a zealot, remember, we were going to go on our first kind of international vacation with our family, and it was in COVID, and so in order to do that, you had to be vaccinated. And so in one sense, it was kind of a pragmatic decision, but it was also like I'm such a radical type person that I would have just been like, I'm just not going on vacation then. Like, that's fine. That's not like a big deal to me. Like, I will rest in my own convictions for sure. And I especially was not on board with everything that I knew at that point about kids getting it. Like, I thought that was even worse. But here, so in the end, I decided to get vaccinated. I got the first vaccination, as did all my kids. I didn't agree with or like any of it. And I went in doing it, and I just like, prayed and crossed my arm and took the shot and did it with the kids. And even still, like, to this day, I don't like, I think we're at a place where we can talk about it well. And I'm at a place where I was able to do it, I think, with truly giving it up and dying to myself and not resenting, because this is the thing, is like, you can sit there and stand on the hill. Like, even now I could stand on the hill of like, I think I was right, but
Right.
you can be right and be wrong, or be wrong and be right. That's why I say
Right.
these things. It's like, it doesn't
Well, in a
even matter.
relationship, you want to be happy, you want to be right, or you want to be happy. And
Yeah.
so I think, like, could you pull those comments off? I think we were continuing into the conversation, like what Paul mentioned, you sacrifice your wife or your kids, and then Maryland understood the sacrifice, and Phlebas came in here. I hope they saw the depth of that conversation we were having was like, no, it required the ascent of the wife in the hidden life. Like I said, you need to slow down. Like, these things need to happen. And so, a lot of the wisdom stuff I've come to have come from, sadly, for those around me, my own massive personal failures. I've had to learn these lessons the hard way. Right. So, for example, one of the decisions, the Holy Spirit experience I had, being pressed in the ground, the calling on my life to leave this executive legal career and go out into this bivocational house church model. I was willing to sacrifice all that, but it was very, very, very difficult on my family. Like, I literally got to the point to where we were living literally, like, I didn't know how I was going to, there were sometimes I was 10 days out and I didn't know how we were going to pay for food or our shelter. Right.
Yeah.
Now, I was very blessed. We never went out without a meal. You would be amazed how God, God,
Yep.
these amazing things happen. Needed $1,000 to pay something. A check would be in my mailbox. Somebody said, was praying. Don't know why. I think you needed this. And it was like, I needed $1,005 and it'd be $1,005 check. Like these crazy,
Yeah.
wild things were happening. But I have had someone who's had to learn to not rush ahead into my convictions and
Fools
to
rush
slow
in,
down.
man.
But I learned that I've learned that hard way, both myself and for others. And so, for example, right now I'm going to have a conversation. Something's been brewing in me for a while. I just scheduled it on Grail Country tonight, where I want to kind of share my story about what I was struggling with and all the things that I did. And some of this ties in, and then kind of making the case kind of in the Western church around liturgy and sacrament. Just these things are just brewing in me. But one of the things is really going on in my life right now. I cannot unsee the patterns and the daily way of life and the prayer and the fasting and everything I've built in these services that I've been attending, in the Orthodox Church.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't unsee certain things, but my wife is not there yet. So I could have been, and in past life would have been already been baptized, and just if she comes, great, whatever. I got to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, and the reason is we're on this long path, giving her time, which is we will join together or I won't join.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can't go back to this other thing now that I've seen this, you know, and
Yeah.
it's other thing. But you know how hard it is for me to be an all-in guy,
Yeah, I know.
and
I get it.
and quite frankly, the most I have gone. I go to all the services, and so the pinnacle of the service is the Eucharist,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
not participating in the whole motion of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Like everything is integrated to this moment,
Yeah.
right? But I don't go up to partake. And I'll tell you what, God has given me a lot of comfort and some other things around that. Like I mystically, so what do? Like I sit there, and although I'm not there, I, in my charismatic self, mystically take the Eucharist. I know that sounds weird and wooey and everything else, but the fact of the matter is, I can't run ahead of my wife. I'm one flesh, right?
Yeah.
Am I going to take this stuff seriously? And so because of that, I've had to learn all this patience. Now, I will tell you, there's been amazing fruit in that, because uh, it has played out in different ways in my life that have unintended consequences of actually showing that kind of patience and dying to what I want to do and what I see,
Mm-hmm.
and and who I am. But I'll tell you, it has meant a lot to her, despite the struggles. And you know, so it's that is, and here's the thing: like resentments are the number one offender. They mentioned the folks in 12-step recovery programs.
Yep.
I've had to battle my resentment. We shared this live or whatever. I don't share a lot of this. This is something that's pretty
Mm-hmm.
obvious. You be there. I've really had to work on my resentment that she doesn't see what I see and won't come do what I want to do. And so that that thing, I can be great with it, at peace with it, and then it can come up and it can eat at me. And it's this daily battle of that. But that goes back to the depth of what the hidden life couple were. I need to look like him and them,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the model. And so it's not to, no, you don't sacrifice your kids, you don't sacrifice your wife for your own convictions. No, 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 no. But you also still have those convictions, and you have to live those with integrity. And for me, it's trying. So here's what I know I need to be. I need to be such, these things have to work, and I need to practice these things. And ultimately, I have to be such a transformed man and that's part of what's actually pulled her into wanting to, she's opened her up to it, because she's seen the change in me. She saw evangelical charismatic guy trying to do all this stuff, and then she's seeing this vast change, and she's like, that's what she's like, I can't deny something has radically changed in you since you started doing these things.
Yeah.
So I've looked at myself and was like, okay, Lance, if you want what you want, then why don't you just go after this thing and be the man, transform man so much that she can't deny it. She's like, I'm going to join you in this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's all you ultimately can do, because, you know, the God is not tyrannical, and us as images of God should also not be tyrannical. So like Marielle asked this, how in was your wife when you converted to Orthodoxy? So not in at all. So I think my wife and I we've been together a very long time, and we've been through a lot together. In like my early, when we got married, we ended up at a church that was very I would say fundamentalist, evangelical, kind of young, restless, reformed. You know, that's been stuff that's talked about on Paul's channel. And I am very much like Lance. You know, I had my rage stage Calvinism, and you know, I was very incredibly zealous, doing street evangelism, all that stuff. And I would say early on in our marriage, we kind of see this was in my radical fidelity to my new found zeal of faith. I essentially left my wife behind in just like going out doing street evangelism, going to all these church services, Bible studies, systematic theology studies, reading Jonathan Edwards. You know, I was just like in that. and very much left her behind because I was just like, whatever. I remember having a conversation with her where, I don't know, she was talking about something else and like interest in something else or whatever. And I was basically like, and I was basically like, this is all going to burn. Like, who cares? Like this is the world, like who cares? Let's be focused on heavenly things. Set your mind on heavenly things, And that actually came up, quick aside, before I go on to answer the orthodoxy question, but Jordan Hall he characterized this, he perfectly characterized like the evangelicalism I grew up in one of the clips that Paul played, which was exactly that. It was just like, this is all going to burn. Like, let's withdraw from the world. Like that was very much my upbringing. And then I just really went deep into it in this Young, Restless, and Reformed thing. And so it's also what my wife calls my bobblehead phase, which I can still have sometimes, where like I'll be talking about something and it's just like, where I'm just like self-righteously proclaiming the truth from on high or something. And so that's all context for then my conversion to orthodoxy, because it was just this slow change into a much more orthodox way of understanding truth and fidelity, which are conversations that happen in this little corner all the time. Like, how do you have unity of faith without uniformity of faith? Like having the mind of Christ, the phronema of the church, versus like everybody agreeing on absolutely every point of doctrine. Like those are just different things that I didn't really understand. I don't understand fully, because you understand things through initiation. So when we started entering the church, which was my wife's idea actually, because hey Emily, I think we're similar in a lot of ways. When I began entering the church, which was her idea, because I was so upset all the time in evangelical churches, I just kept wanting to have these conversations, and I did not go to a church. Even though I went to a really great church, I still love a lot of the people from there. That's like Jordan's church, where he allows you to like have conversations about like Eastern versus Western Trinity. I'm like, what evangelical church are you going to? I don't think these things exist. But in the recession of the dominance of Christianity culturally, that might happen, where like they actually open up and let you talk about things. So it was her idea, because I was so mad all the time. It just bled over into every avenue of life, because that's the kind of person I am. I was so upset of the blindness that I thought I saw in the church, and like the non-talking that I thought was happening, and all these sorts of things, that she was just like, we have to do something else. Like this just we can't have this ruin our entire life. And so we just started going. I had been interested in the Orthodox Church just through books and from afar and YouTube, and we just started going. And it was one of those things where we never looked back. I actually remember the last evangelical church thing I did, it was a small group night, and I decided to not go to the small group, and I went to a lecture. It's online somewhere with Pete Enns. Pete Enns was like locally somewhere.
Yeah, you had long hair. Hair, and you went up to the microphone. It was awesome.
Yeah, so I'm like at the very end of that Pete Enns lecture. It's like out on YouTube somewhere. It's probably in I probably have it in a playlist on my channel. But yeah, I had long hair, and I had this like hippie sweater on. It was very Luke thing. And I remember asking him this, like I essentially asked him this question, like where I was saying something like, when you get to the point where you just, it started to feel like we're just speaking different languages, and I can't, it's like I've moved into another world, and I don't know how to relate to the other world anymore. So all that, this is a very long answer. I'm sorry, Mariel. So when we moved, I'll get to the point. My wife is, she's not like all us weirdos. Like this to her is insane. Talking about all these things is weird. And she is not antagonistic to orthodoxy. She is, she comes whenever she's able to come, and talks to the people and enjoys it all and participates to the degree that she can participate. She helps serve at like Lenten dinners, and when we're helping at fellowship meals after church and that sort of thing, coffee hour. She's very involved in that way. And I don't even think she's opposed to, in as much as she cares and pays attention to the theology of the Orthodox Church, she's not opposed to any of that. Her thing, and this is very much an American Orthodoxy problem, is like, this is all very foreign to me. This is not my culture. There are still, I go to an OCA church. There's a lot of remnants of Eastern Europeans, kind of Slavic culture. And the rite is Eastern. It's an Eastern rite. And so to her, it's just all very foreign. She's just like, okay, I could maybe get on board with like all the theology, but like this isn't me culturally. And I get all that. Like those aren't even illegitimate things. And so all that to say is she has not converted. I'm different than Lance. I actually did convert. I was initially going to do the same thing as you, very like Nathan Jacobs style, right? Because do you remember Nathan Jacobs from Reaching the Nun?
Yeah.
So he did the same thing. Like I think he waited to convert for 7 years or something till his wife was ready to convert, which was very hard for him because he's the same kind of guy. I mean, he's a zealot. He's a very passionate guy. And but I decided to convert because my kids had converted, and I kind of didn't want to leave them in the lurch a little bit. And also I just came to the realization that like my wife may never convert, and that's fine. Like it's one of those things that was almost a dying to my idealism. And this isn't like it, because you can be either way is fine. Like it's not there is no right path. Yeah.
Right for each couple and everything. And that's why it is like, you've got to find the right way. Again, it all comes down to the personal. Like it's the personal of your relationship, right? Like what's right for one, it may not be right for another. But it's you just need to be sensitive to that and make that like one of the things. One of the things that's very interesting, which frustrates my wife, which probably your wife too, because only 30% of people on the Myers-Briggs are intuitives and 70% are sensors. So they're detail people first and whatever. I'm a high intuitive, right?
Yeah.
And my wife is a high sensor, like the details, the weed. She's a very literal person. So for example, if we're watching a movie and she misses one word, like she wants to rewind to hear the word. And I'm like, well, we're watching the scene. Like, I don't care I miss words, whatever. I'm here. I know where it's going. Like I didn't miss anything. Right.
Yeah.
And so for me to go in, so for example, that space where it's different is I'm intuiting into these patterns, and I'm also very charismatic too.
Yeah.
And so like, I very much, for me to be into what's happening in that place, like the angels and the mystery, like I'm tapping into this space up here. And so if things are weird or I'm not catching because by the way, in a 3 hour, if you go to the prayer service before, and then if you go for the full divine liturgy, you'll be standing for 3 hours, right? For the most part.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get everything. Like you're just not, and it's okay. Like it's okay. Like you're going to get the bits you get. You're in here. You're there.
It's one of my favorite parts of the Orthodox liturgy. You got to let it go because there's too much.
But see, that's easy for me, Luke. Like, because that's how I operate. And so for her, some of the struggles she's had is like she wants to hear every word. Yes. And when you're in a 3 hour service. By the way, I wouldn't make her do the prayer service before, and those I do that when I'm by myself. But so for her, it's like she's every word matters. So in an hour and 45-minute liturgy, like it's maddening to her because she's like, wait a minute, they said this too fast and whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, so this is me, and I'm being honest. Like in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, if you're worried about every word, you're never going to make it through this.
Yeah. Well, and Lance, so I think part of that is a natural temperamental thing, right? Like you were saying, sensing versus intuiting. Part of that's just natural, but you can learn and grow and evolve and shift in that. And it's just a training in your sense organs or something, because like, I'll give some examples. Like Malik is very this way. Like if you're trying to figure out, it's kind of like my live stream. What's the point? Like it's a very left brain thing to just be like, what's the point? I want to know the detail. Like it's a constructing reality thing. But the problem is like, if you're focused on all the detail, you're never going to see the mosaic, right? You're never going to zoom out and see it, which Malik's whole Malik's whole filmmaking style is about that. It's just like, if you try to focus on details and you go and watch Tree of Life, like, good luck. Or it's like, in my book club, we read Faulkner's Absalom. And Faulkner is classically known as like a difficult to follow American author. Like, he's a little, it's a challenge, but like, very much to your point, if you try to focus on the detail of what Faulkner is saying and just be like, why is he saying this? And you're trying to like piece it together, like, it's gonna suck. Your reading of Faulkner is really gonna suck. But that book is almost an exercise. It was a challenge for a lot of people in our book club. And it was a challenge for me too, until I realized, because I can read that way. I like the detail. Like, when I read the Bible, it's really hard for me because I really like to get into the detail and words, and I just like I zoom in. But you'll never get through the book. You'll get stuck infinitely in this like infinite regress versus like the zooming out. But if you just read Faulkner and you just learn to let things go, which you have to get through the book, all of a sudden you start to pick up on this bigger thing that he's doing. And you start to see things that you would never see focusing on the myopia. And so there are ways to train those.
Well, and even so, this is like, so one of the things that's amazing about my wife is she always notices the moon and sunsets. And if we get to a place where the stars are popping, if we're away and farther enough from the city, kind of washing out to whatever, like, she gets captured by beauty and wonder. Like, she still wonders when she sees a moon. Like, it will never not be, she will never not have wonder and go, ooh, when she sees the moon, a beautiful moon, or, the sunrise and the sunsets. And so, and then those moments, like when she's there, when she's in that place of wonder, she's not grinding and thinking about that stuff. She has the absolute. So one of the things I was able to share with her a little bit, and then she, made this flip, because, I said, one of the things that can happen, I said, it's okay. Like I said, look around at all the beauty. Like I said, just look around at the beauty. It's okay. Like, it's okay just to sit there and look at this beautiful art, like, it's okay to look at this beautiful sense and just stare at that. Like, it's okay to just wonder at the beauty in the middle of this service.
Well, and I think Orthodox would say that, because it's just a different, like, priests will say that all the time. Like, just being there is important. Smell the incense. Look at an icon. Focus on another person. Tayo. Was that Tayo? It's hilarious. But or like, it's why the sermon is kind of dispensable. There's like, whatever, like, if we're running short on time, just like, don't do the sermon, because like all the particular, like the hyper focus on the words and the ideas are not the central aspect of Orthodoxy.
So this is a really good, Paul's made this point. And so one of the things, now that I've experienced this going on 4 years now, here's the bulwark. And I mentioned this, and I'm going to get into this, talk about this a little bit tonight. But one of the things that, while yes, you do have converts coming into Orthodoxy, Richard Rowland even had a wonderful conversation with Jonathan Pajot, where he talks to American convert Christians, is like, quit trying to change everything, just be. Like, in 200 years, in South Texas, the meal afterwards will be guacamole and tamales and stuff. Just that stuff will happen, right? But in terms of how this works, is the one thing I don't see, even from converts or cradle converts, or even progressive Orthodox, that, quite frankly, there's cradle progressive Orthodox that want to change things, and women priests and stuff like that. All this stuff is kind of happening, is that the daily cycle of the prayers, no one wants to change any of that. The Jesus prayer, the liturgies, no one wants it moving any way about that. And so the bulwark of what you do, like, it's a way of life, like, it's these practices. And Monday builds into Tuesday, into Wednesday, into Thursday, into Friday, into Saturday, into Sunday, and it's a daily cycle. And if you actually start getting into these, and Christian Baxter and Kel Zeldin had an amazing conversation, and Christian was touching on a lot of this stuff, where the bulwark is the liturgy and the patterns and the services. And see, here's what happens. What is changing me are the daily liturgical prayers I'm practicing and the Jesus prayer. what's changing this individualism and all this Protestant or whatever that is like the patterns and the services, and that those things are the things that are the transformational elements. And with the homily only being 10 to 15 minutes out of, if you go to the prayer service before and you stay for the whole divine liturgy, the 3 hours, 15 minutes out of 3 hours has a homily where an individual is going to give a sermon. The rest of it is on, and that pattern is on autopilot, and it has been for thousands of years.
Right. And that's the Orthodox, initiation, because that's kind of the way that I really see it fundamentally. Is I'm coming to articulate it more succinctly, I think, is the proper kind of knowing anything as fully as possible happens through initiation. Like initiation is really, it's kind of almost another way to say my personalist knowing, which is all the P's, because you have participatory, you have procedural, you have propositional, and you have what's the other P?
Procedural, propositional, perspectival.
All of those are present in initiation. Like when you are embodied and initiated in something, and the way to really think about it is like I'm initiated in my family. So like I know my family. I'm very initiated in my body. I'm initiated in my community. I'm initiated in my church. I'm initiated in the English language. These are the things that I know. I'm not initiated in Chinese. And so like the liturgy is the means within Orthodoxy for catechesis and initiation, which includes propositional, but it's not just propositional. It's everything.
And what you believe going into it. Like if you have a very dead spirit about what you think you're walking into and it's just doing things, you're not going to get, but if you open your mind up to, you're going into the heavenly and all those other things, that changes. Here's the other thing that's been wild. So of course I'm one of these church nerd guys. Like I did go to seminary and became a house church pastor. So I go down these rabbit trails. I was raised in Methodism. So I went back and I looked at, well, what were the original Sunday services in Methodism? Well, first off, he was an Anglican. So Common Book of Prayer. And then they had the prayer services before. And I was watching these prayer services. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Matins. Like I could see it. Of course, there would be some changes. I'm like, oh, I say those prayers right now today. Like I was tapping into, and then he made this comment in the 1700s that that I thought was amazing, which is basically where is this quote? Into the Methodist service, it says, the service of the Lord's Day, the length of which has often been complained of, is considerably shortened. And so I know what they were complaining about. Hey, we're here for an hour. We're here for an hour for the prayer service. And now we're here for an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours. Like this is too long. And so we've gone to this watering down. I saw a Lutheran mass that was a Lutheran, Luther's liturgy and service. It was the divine liturgy, but he changed some faith alone and some other things, but it was the same thing. I actually went back and looked at Calvinists. And Paul would even know this or whatever, but they had prayers and they were doing all these services. There was much more of this liturgical stuff going on, even within Western Protestantism. And so as we've lost, like even, and that's my deal. I want to be there. This isn't pro bro versus ortho bro. And yes, there are pro bros out there. Let's don't act like there's only ortho bros. There's a lot of pro bros, but it's not that. It's not that at all. Like it's almost, and I'm probably giving away some of what I want to passionately talk about tonight, is like, I actually looked at it. I'm like, wait a minute. We had these patterns, and as we went down to the individual and we became seeker and became relevant, and people were whining about the service being too long, so it's got to be an hour, and people are coughing at the pastor if his sermon's too long, right? We watered down, and then we're watering down again to TEDx concert in a coffee shop, and people are going, I'm out. We've lost our way. So let me get on a rant there, but I think all that stuff. So I think ultimately, I think a return to pattern, symbolism, liturgy, like Cale Zeldin and Christian Baxter had this amazing conversation around that. Like, I think those are and then you also see a lot of my friends, before I even knew what Orthodoxy was, to be brutally honest, we were all having conversations of wanting to come back to this idea of sacrament, Eucharist. Like if you all over Protestant YouTube, you can see they're having those conversations like they feel like they've lost something.
Yeah, well, and so I listen to that to riff on what you're saying. I listened to Christian Baxter and Kale talk, and one of the things they talked in there was like they spent a little bit of time talking about Vatican II and post Vatican II and moving from Latin Mass to the other Mass, and they were saying, and I didn't even realize this, I guess, but I mean, it makes sense. It's like the old Latin Mass, all the priests and everything are facing the altar, and then in Vatican II they move and they face the the parishioners in the crowd, and it's an interesting thing because that's one of the things that can be very weird for you, like if you've never been to an Orthodox service, is like a vast majority of the time the deacons are facing the altar, and so like you're like they're coming out of these doors and then they're just like standing in front of these icons and facing away from you, and you're like, what is going on? Like as a Protestant, you're just like, why are they staring at the wall? Like that just makes no sense, and part of that is these things aren't arbitrary. Like American Protestantism, individualism, looking at me, like facing me, paying attention to me, like that whole look versus looking at the altar. What I would say is about Orthodoxy and like the Latin Mass versus the current Mass is that within Orthodoxy, my understanding of Orthodoxy and the fullness of Orthodoxy and the way that it's practiced, at least in America and a lot of places, is that there is the standard, right? Which is like the rule, which is, matins, liturgy, all the services, maybe Wednesday vespers, Thursday liturgy. There's all these different services throughout the week. And then on festal holidays, there's more services. I wouldn't even say I wouldn't say there's an expectation that everyone's going to all those. Those are just the services. The choir and the chanters and the readers and the deacons and the priests, they're going to be there. They're doing their vocation. And then if people want to join into that to whatever degree they can participate and be initiated into that, they're welcomed into it. But it's not, nobody is, there probably are places, there's always exceptions to this, but broadly in my experience has been nobody's sitting there browbeating you saying like, attend more services, be at all the services, like don't get up and leave during the service, don't whatever. It's the way that my priest really said it is that the Orthodox Church is very conservative and rigid in one sense, but he's like, you have to remember what you're conserving, which is hospitality. So like, you come in, like a lot of Orthodox people, like they maybe show up for the gospel or, and then they'll take communion and then they leave. And then it's a very like free flowing thing, and it's a very like, I think fundamentally because, and as far as I know from talking to people that know more than me and that are initiated in Orthodoxy more than me, it is a very personalist religion. Different people are going to need different things out of that. So for the people that want to go, like yourself, and attend absolutely every service, do all the prayers, like be more on the rigorous line of things, and not in like a I don't believe this about you at all. You are just an all or nothing guy, which is beautiful. Like it's beautiful. There's diversity within the body of Christ. For you who wants to go and do all that stuff, wonderful. For the person who wants to just show up at the gospel and is somewhat of a, what did my son called it the other day, like the Christmas, Easter Christians or whatever. Great. We'd love to have you come, And so it's there's a degree of non-judgment there,
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing for me that what works, what I just found practically, and again, I'm going to dive into this night at 7 o'clock on Grail Country, is just the whole integrated nature of it. So kind of like when I'm doing well, and by the way, I want to tell people like I had long periods of times where I was on it, like throughout the day, I had a great rhythm where and my job allowed me to get away and kind of do my hourly prayers and do that stuff. And I was really, really attacking the Jesus prayer. And it was amazing. Like I was totally being transformed. It was time to do that. And now that I've moved and I've kind of gotten off kilter, and this is kind of the story of my life, and I caught myself like I haven't done it. But what I really like about, at least so for me, what are the practices? Like it's become this integrated thing. So a lot of the prayers that I'm doing in my daily life, well, those show up then when I show up to the services because you're repeating these prayers, right? So, everything just kind of integrates into everything else. And so like like what I'm doing in the services I'm practicing the things that I'm going and I'm practicing in my own quiet time in my daily life, and then I'm getting these tools to reset my day, because I don't know if like other people out there, but there are times where I find myself like, quite frankly, not acting appropriately and not having the right state of mind, and being pissy or whatever, or whatever. I can go reset. I can reset myself. You can restart your day at any point during the day. And so the more I have all that stuff integrated, now it's this thing that I catch myself quicker in those moments. And then I do this practice to reset myself, and so like for even in 12-step programs, they have a lot of these like liturgical prayers, whether it be the Serenity Prayer. A lot of people in 12-step programs use this prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. There are these different prayers around the steps that help you do these things, like these things that are these triggers to kind of reset you. But what I like is there's this very I think what's helpful sometimes is when things can become really integrated.
Yeah. So to riff on your point, and to answer this question by pick and choose, is there a stricter dress code in a typical Orthodox service than in Catholic, or can we attend in jeans and a hoodie without drawing attention to yourselves? I would say it depends. Like, in my church, for example, I think there's a wide spectrum of dress, and it's very along. Can you hear my little back massager, by the way, Lance?
No, I
Okay.
can't.
So
I hope they can. I hope they can, because that'd be amazing, but I can't.
I've been having some back struggles, man. Anyhow. So I think you're going to see the full spectrum, and part of it because American Orthodoxy is so culturally diverse, really. A lot of it is divided along those cultural lines. And so like most of the gray-haired people in church, you're going to see a lot of suits. There's a lot of younger temperamental lines. There's going to be people that wear suits and things, but the younger people less so. I think, but again, it's the same thing. Like there's a proper way to do it. I think in Orthodoxy, they'd say you should come in your Sunday best, that kind of attitude. I think that's what people would say. Peugeot has talked about this. Like there's a proper uniform and dress, like how you dress yourself is appropriate for different contexts, and you don't show up to a wedding in, a garbage bag, and it's the same thing. I think the Orthodox would say it's the same thing in church. However, the degree that you're going to stand out and be judged is going to vary from parish to parish, I'm sure. If you go to a long-standing OCA church like mine, no one's gonna care, I think, really.
Well, what I would say,
ahead.
I would say in Orthodoxy, which is a lot with the theology, it's a big tent. If you're going to go to a certain Romanian church, they're on point. Like there are certain places where they're going to be a little bit more of a stickler. Like, so for example, when I started going, it was right in the middle of winter and it was super cold, and I'm a bald guy, and so I was wearing my skull cap or whatever.
Yeah.
My stocking hat. And I was wearing it in the service and had my jacket on or whatever. And I kept attending, and it was kind of just right post COVID. So a lot of people weren't coming to services. So there were maybe 15 of us. I did this for like 3 months. My priest never said anything to me or whatever. And finally, some nice old gentleman he comes to me, he goes, "We don't wear hats. Men don't wear hats in the service." Very calmly or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, why didn't somebody tell me that ahead of time? But my priest said nothing about it. You know why? He was just happy I was there.
Right. Right. The same thing happened to me with shorts at one point. And like even now you'll see people with shorts occasionally. But like this cradle Orthodox lady came up to me once when I came in shorts, and it was something where I was pressed for time. I had been doing some work and I was out somewhere else, and I was trying to make the service, and I came in shorts, and she just politely whispered to me, like that's not the expectation. And so like I've stopped wearing shorts, but also like I took a trip with my church to Georgia, and we like stopped in Poland on our way to Georgia. And like, especially there, you go to like an Orthodox church over there, like in Georgia, they have signs everywhere. Like I have one on my phone where it's just like, they have little visuals of like shorts, tank tops, whatever. They're just like, nope. And they have like a circle around it and crossed out. They're just like,
Right.
they will get upset and like,
I would say that if you're, by the
out.
way, if there's someone here who's interested in whatever, and you might want to poke your way in here, I would think the most widely accepted viewpoint is you're going to meet the King and you're going to meet Christ, and this is reverent. Like Kale mentioned this in the conversation, that when some people saw the traditional Latin Mass, like when he saw it, it's like, oh, there's a reverence here that I hadn't seen.
Yeah.
And so people aren't. Some people will, but I would say that it's business casual kind of would be kind of like the lowest bar of that, and there are some people that would do that. That being said, I have absolutely been in churches where people have worn shorts, where people have showed up in various amounts of dress, and I'm sure some places they might get a talking to, but I've never had anyone. What happens is you finally look around and you're like, wait a minute, no one's wearing shorts around here. And naturally you're like, maybe I'll put on a pair of khakis.
Right. And I don't know, there is no, like, kind of within Orthodoxy there, because I would say fundamentally it's a mystical Christianity and it is non-dual. I mean, I think it is there is no right answer. Again, it's like, it's very conservative, but what are you conserving? Hospitality. So yes. Like there is a right answer, but there's also not a right answer. Is it come as you are, or is it reverence and Sunday best? Yes. And it's like there was so we're starting to have some more catechumens at our church and inquirers. And actually this family showed up to this last thing. I mean, it was like full on family. I can't even remember, 4 or 5 kids, grandma, husband and wife showed up, and they were all like suits, very nice, very well dressed. And they showed up and they came to this catechumen class that's happening during the church school or whatever. And I went up to it because I'm just a dork, and my buddy was leading it, my friend who's one of the deacons. And we ended up, I think I asked him or whatever, because I'm just extroverted and enthusiastic and outgoing. And I said, like, what brings you here? And they were basically like, well, we just think we're done with Protestantism, essentially. And I don't know, it was interesting. I would love to talk to them more. They had all sorts of questions, but the older son, who's probably like up, junior, senior in high school or something like that, said, like, you could just tell, like, they are much more of like a rigorous type family. He was saying, he got sick of people going to church, and they can't even like put on a suit, and they're coming in just like shorts and flip-flops and things. And I'm just thinking, like, oh man, like you are and you are not going to find, like, depending on what you're looking for, you are and you are not going to find it in Orthodoxy. I mean, you're going to find that kind of rigor if you want it. But like, if you're going to have the expectation that is an absolute exclusivist way that the church is, it's not. Like, it's just not.
Well, that's one of the things that, like, even like my wife has struggled a bit with, because we'll be watching Bishop Callisto Square, who's kind of a hopeful universalist, and he's a bishop, like, so he's totally in communion and fine. And then you'll watch another bishop somewhere else, and he's talking about something that looks a lot more like eternal separation, right? And she's like, wait a minute, they're both. I'm like, yeah, dear. They're both Orthodox. Like, and she's like, well, how could that be? I'm like, well, it's a big tent. Like, you have the creed, and have these liturgies, but you're going to get, like, you're going to get these wide varying opinions about some of these things, which I think you can't overly define them. And so you can have a priest in good standing who might be persuaded and talking about things in a certain way, or be attracted to certain saints that are there. And the thing I love about the saints is, like, they can say anything. Is like, you'll see them and they'll say things and you'll be like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem traditional Orthodox, but the St. Porphyrius just said it, and so it allows for, there's a lot of, like, I know it seems weird, but there's a lot of freedom to be different. And so again, for my wife, who's very much give me the facts, like, I want the details and the stuff. And so she's like, wait a minute, so this bishop here is a hopeful universalist, and this saint over here there. And then this saint seems to be talking about being afraid of an eternal separation. How do I make sense of that? And I'm like, well, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Right?
want to address this. So Paul said this, women ortho priests, how big is that tent? So if you, I mean, I could riff on that and talk about that, and we probably will here, but if you want like a more official answer, I have on a playlist, it's probably like quality videos to remember on my channel. I know you looked for the other video, Paul, that isn't there. I'll remedy that. But there's a lecture by Dr. Eugenia Constantau or something like that. I don't know how to say her last name, who was at my church for this for a lecture series that my church puts on every year, and it was on the phronema of the church. The audio and video aren't great, and I've shared it a lot of times. There's two of them, part 1 and a part 2. The part 2, at the end of it, there's a Q&A, and there's one of my friends from the church asks a bunch of questions related to all the women in church stuff. She asks like a bunch of those questions, and this Dr. Eugenia responds. So if you want, there's a more official answer.
And I'd point people to Dr. Eugenia. She's very well respected. She's a doctor. She's been Orthodox her whole life. She's great Orthodox. Her husband is a priest. She gives really good, solid answers on that. And Paul, you even mentioned this, I think, in one of your live streams where you're talking about you can see the difference between when you have the priesthood of all believers in Protestantism, and particularly when communion is just a symbol, and all like there's all these different things in Protestantism that I think it makes it very different. Like there are these roles and hierarchies that have been given to us if you're going to follow down that traditional realm, and the role of the priest in Orthodoxy and in Roman Catholicism is really different. Like it's pretty wild. Not to mention the fact they actually like to have their parish priests be married because I think that's valuable. Right. And then also, once you're a priest, you're always a priest. You're not going to become you're not going to become a bishop or a metropolitan. Like that comes out of the monastic community. So it's this whole different thing. But I think it's different. I think it is different. Now, to be fair, and particularly the Greek Archdiocese of America is the most progressive. The leadership, the elite is definitely progressive. And so the same things you see playing out at other places, they're trying to dip their toe in that water. Now, the priesthood in the Greek Orthodox Church is pushing pretty heavy about that. Mount Athos isn't going anywhere near to that. So you kind of have those things coming in. I have not really seen any significant movement to try and think that there should be women priests. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's anything that's close. And the other thing, Orthodox, they do these things so slow that I believe this cultural moment that's happening, that is this whole gender stuff that got made up in the 60s and now has made its way here for this. Yeah. This pendulum, is going to swing back, and I don't know what that would look like, but I think there are particular bulwarks in Orthodoxy that will keep quite frankly, the role of the priest male.
Well, and I think it's just like because Orthodoxy is symbolic, the priest is representing Christ, and Jesus was a man, and so it's not. It's almost just like as simple as that. Like it has nothing to do with gifting. And a lot of people have talked about
this is the Trojan horse. So if you want to talk, so let's just put this up. The Trojan horse is, I've seen this play out in the Methodist Church. You're seeing this play out in the CRC Church. Here's the fear, Marielle, which is some of the people that are trying to have this conversation, they are the more progressive elements that quite frankly don't want to stop at women deaconesses. They want to go from there. And then I say, since we can have deacons, let's have women priests. That's the concern, because we've seen this play out in every denomination so far. And I think the concern around the women deaconesses thing is just, to me, I think a lot of the people that are pushing that are using this new cultural thing, and it's the same thing that they tried to push in other areas. So I think it's a very dangerous thing. And again, I would point people back to Eugenia Constantino, who talked about this. I think there's a very healthy and vibrant role that the women absolutely have today in the church. Like I'll tell you, like my priest would say, who really runs the church? He goes, it's not it's not the parish council. It's the yayas. That's what they call the Greeks. They call their grandmas. There is that base of faithful old women, and I'm telling you, they're going to keep that priest in line, and they're going to keep the church in line. And so there's a lot of power in that base, and they don't need to be a deaconess to exert that power.
Well, and I don't know. I'm going to say something that will probably piss people off, but whatever. I think a lot of the discussion around female clergy and deaconesses and all that, and often the retort from the other side has a lot to do with ego and power, and it has nothing, like, if at a very simple level, like, it doesn't it just doesn't matter. Like, if I think you have a proper understanding of hierarchy where the higher serves the lower, it's just like, who's arguing for, like, I wish there was, like, it really bugs me that the Theotokos is feminine, is like a woman. Like, I don't know, it's just like a dumb thing to say, in my opinion. Like, I just don't care. I don't actually even have a problem with female deaconesses. It's just like, it's just not my place to. I said this, Lance, the other day too. Like, even when it comes down to, like, some of the debates of Chalcedon and like meophysitism versus diphysitism, I don't know. Like, I don't know what my opinion is. It doesn't matter to me, really, and I don't feel the need to constantly protest everything and try to change everything. It's just like,
Yeah,
who cares?
I think that's a big part of it. Sherry, I wish she was on here because she speaks about this, or the whole idea of the feminine and, like, the Sophia, all that stuff. Like, there's so many things I can't explain, but I've experienced it now, coming on 4 years. That's like, there's with the Theotokos, right? And all of these things, like, there's this, you would think that they only have male priests, but there's this powerful feminine that lives and exists in Orthodoxy. It's incredible. And I would say this, one of the things, Phlebas says, interesting that most converts aren't women. That's your view if you're only on the internet. I actually have some pictures that I would share. So I'm going to these Antiochian churches, where, like, Josiah Trenum's Orthodox Church, they're booming. Like, they're doing hundreds of adult baptisms. Yeah. I've been to 2 Antiochian churches here in Houston, filled. Like, I went to this catechumen class. I took a picture. 40% were single women too. There's single men. There's families. There's young people everywhere. It's the demographic that most pastors dying to have come to his church. And so that's not really true, Phlebas.
Hezi, what up, my boy? Bring it.
Hello, boys. First of all, Lance, I miss you. I hope you're doing well, and it's good to hear that you are acclimating well since your move. So I'm really happy to hear that. So just on this topic of women, those women, just on the topic of women, that in my little neck of the woods, so women are not supposed to be rabbis. It's controversial because there are rabbis, even Orthodox rabbis, that do give ordination to women. Having said that, generally speaking, my opinion, well, it's sort of split. It really matters sort of what's the intention behind it, right? And can the community accommodate this as well? And there are communities where I think it would be wrong to force it down people's throat if they're not ready for that kind of change. There's also people that need to realize, are you running after the title, or do you want to be involved in the community? Because many more Orthodox rabbis are very okay with women acting as guides, giving halachic decrees. And this has been, since Devorah the prophetess, right? Like I'm saying, we always had this, like, women could be leaders. The question is, are they trying to take on the role of the man in a certain sense? And that's where the rub is. And it really matters about the intention, because if there is a woman that is unique and shows that that is now, she's not looking for the glory. She's not looking to replace men. She's not looking to change the culture. Then it's blessed. The problem is it's very hard to detect when they're playing games and when they're not. So if you zoom out, for example, generally speaking, the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, which I won't get into what the Wailing Wall is, but either way, the Wailing Wall, generally speaking, historically has a separate seating, right? There's the women's side, there's the men's side. Then there is another section which was designated for the women of the wall, and this is like a reform group that comes once a month, and it's women that are wearing phylacteries, which usually men wear, and it's a whole joint, it's a whole co-ed service. Now, they're always giving a hard time because a lot of the ultra orthodox come and they say you can't do this. This is nonsense. So after 2,000 years of being in exile, if someone wants to go and pray to God by the Wailing Wall, that's amazing. I don't want to stop anyone. But if I zoom in right now and then I see, okay, are they doing this because after 2,000 years they just want to yearn and they want to connect to their father, or are they trying to create some political statement and make a provocation? And it's very difficult to really decipher in each case which is which. So women are the most amazing.
We all like women here, don't we? All us guys, we all like women, correct?
And there's a blessing. I'm sure Jacob's stomach is turning, but there's a blessing. There's many blessings we say in the morning as Jews, but one of the blessing is we say, take no offense. One of them is thank you. Thank you for giving the rooster so he could understand between night and day. Thank you for not making me a Gentile. And and men say thank you for not making me a woman, and women say thank you for making me thank you for basically making me the way you wanted to. Okay. And that's always been like a point of tension, which is like the men are saying, I don't want to be a woman. The woman doesn't say, thank you for not making me a man, but thanks for making me. Now, my family, my children, both the men and the women say the same thing. Just thank you for making me the way you wanted to. And that's it. Now, there's controversy there, but my attitude is that is just, it's disrespectful for women. It's not relevant anymore. So there's room for change. But women in general, in all different religious cultures, we require patience. This is a complicated and convoluted web. And while you are correct that item 1, you could remove it, we don't know how that's going to affect the Jenga. We don't know how it's going to affect the web. We don't know if it's going to rip things out. So it just takes time. And it's not that people are not eager to change. It's not that people don't want to have you involved. And it's not that we don't even recognize how we are lacking the fact of the feminine inside. It requires time. And I think people need to be patient. People need to show willingness, but people also need to be patient. You can't push these things.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think what's funny is like this image came to mind is it's just like, is a woman, and this isn't the case, but I think a lot of times what it feels like women and men pushing for women priesthood, it feels like the equivalent in church of like Charlize Theron being like an action hero, like beating the shit out of guys. And I'm just like, you think that's an elevation of like the feminine and females? No, it's a joke. Like, it's ridiculous. That's how it can feel sometimes to me. It's not, that's not, to me, it's a false feminism, which is why it pisses me off. It's not even pro-woman. It's like pro-woman as a man, which I have zero interest in. I actually don't even think it serves the female person. And you can have a disagreement with me. Like, you can be a woman, disagree with me, and think that's misogynist or whatever. I'm not, it's almost like, it's this false understanding of hierarchy that it's just like the person at the front of the room is like the most important. Well, I actually think that, the person, I think we're called to love the lowly. And I mean, explicitly within Christianity, like, Philippians 2. So like, what is really the best? Like, you want to sit at the high place? I don't know. It's a really
Comes
weird thing
comes
to
with
me.
comes with a lot of responsibility as well.
I have no desire to be a priest, and I don't think
I
that
think
makes me less.
I now, so this would be interesting. I wonder what you guys think about this. So as you know, in Judaism there are around 2 weeks a month that there's no physical contact between husband and wife. And during these 2 weeks, there could be different. There's a calculation of how you're counting these days, and needless to say, people are eager to get these calculations correct. Right? No one wants an extra day not being able to hold his wife. Either way, when dealing with this, historically, people, if there's a question or there's a doubt, you go to the rabbi. Now, it is very uncomfortable for a woman to need to discuss these types of intimate things with a male counterpart. He's a pious rabbi, and they're very gentle and they're very open and warm. So all that's true. However, the understanding, the openness, the comfort space allowed by a woman talking to another woman about that makes a lot more sense. And more women are putting themselves in these positions where they could, at the very least, accommodate where it's specifically a woman issue. So if I'm coming for a confession, which I don't know much about in a Christian world, and I'm dealing with, I'm going to go to an extreme over here right now, but I'm dealing with some sort of, I had an OnlyFans, and I'm getting off of that right now, and I want to talk about that. I can't talk about that with a male priest. I need to talk to that with a woman. I need her to understand me in a certain sense. And there, it would be, I would ask, like, where do you guys fall on that? Like, is there a sensitivity where it makes sense that we'd want a woman to deal with this? Or like, no, even in this case, just speak to the pastor.
Hi, Marielle.
We got a
Hi.
woman now. We can hear the truth.
Oh,
Correct.
this is really weird.
No, this is great. Listen,
Spontaneity day.
fantastic. I'm happy you're here, and I would love to hear what you have to say about
My
this.
kids are busy, and so this won't last too long. But I was thinking about the my reason for being open to women in the Orthodox Church being deacons and restoring that role, because I see a lot of priests in the Orthodox Church that are overworked.
Mhm.
They have too many responsibilities, and also, just bringing more deacons, yes, but perhaps there's a need to serve the women that a woman can fulfill that need. In my case, I was wanting to begin catechism, and the priest is far away. He's got like 10 kids. And initially we were going to meet halfway, but then he said, no, I have too much. I can't do it. And so I'm thinking, there's some ladies at
Yeah.
the church that have time. They are past the raising children stage, and they don't have much to do, and so they could meet me and catechize me, however you say that,
Mhm.
So perhaps a deacon would have the title and the role and the training to do that officially, because I think deacons can have that responsibility as well. I'm not sure.
And so, for example, I've noticed this in both churches, like we just mentioned Eugenio Constantino, who does a lot of retreats and everything else. She was a college professor, and she's the wife of a priest or whatever. She runs the catechism classes at his church and stuff. She actually comes in and does catechism for people.
Okay.
I've been involved in local churches where women are actually playing a role. I mean, so you have what's happening during service, which is the handling of the communion and everything else. But outside of that, I think it's very open. And then another thing, which is I've seen across Antiochian and Greek Orthodox, everything else, is female chanters, right? Which that's the hard job, quite think, for a priest, because you need to have someone come in and do the chanting, because that's half the service. And if you're doing a lot of services or whatever, and that sort of thing brings that inclusiveness in, and allows some of those things to do. Now, depending on what the Orthodox jurisdiction is, I bet you could find, Marielle, I bet there are probably some places in the globe or some places where there could be a priest or a parish where they don't want to have a woman doing that. But I find that, at least in my real world experience, I've been engaged where women, and particularly the older women in the church, have this hugely vital role and are doing a lot of the teaching. And quite frankly, like the presbyteria, the wife of the priest, or other things like there's women's sections, there's women groups or whatever. There's a lot of female to female mentoring, discipling, pastoring, catechizing going on, I think, within the church.
Well, that's good. I didn't know that it didn't have to be a deacon to do that. But I don't see that in the 4 parishes that I've been to. It's always the priest. The deacons are not doing much. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Well,
yeah,
I think
Sherry brings up Saint Macrina, who her brothers, Basil and some of these other ones, she was the one who taught her brothers, who then went on to become these giant saints of the church. So I think in terms of the teaching piece, that's not a part of it. I think, and the interesting thing when you get into this, Marielle, and this is where the slippery slope, because I've looked at that, because I think the people, what people are concerned about, because they've seen this happen in every denomination and every church thing, is the deaconess role going to be the way that they're going to try and move up the ladder? Because that's been the move throughout all of Protestantism. We're gonna slip in here, and then we're going for the whole shebang, right? And I think that's what people are leery of. And
yeah, I see that concern. Yeah.
So I just put a link in here. I just want to say this briefly, which is to that part 2 of Dr. Eugenia at our church, where she came and spoke, and she answered. And at the end, there's at least 2, I can't remember, or 3 questions related to women in the church in Orthodoxy, and she's fantastic because she's fiery too.
I like her.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
I would say, Lance, you said you mentioned the slippery slope, and while I am very I'm very sensitive to that, many times that could be used as an excuse, right? At some point, if you want to explore, if you want to see what's behind the horizon, you got to take a chance. You got to go there, and we're always nervous. I'm like, well, if you do this, who knows where we're gonna go? Now, arguably, people would look at this little corner and be like, this is a bad idea. If you spelled this out to someone, they'd be like, this is a slippery slope. Different denominations talking together, Unitarians, Paul, Zell, who the hell's Grimm? This is not a space where you're going to have people giving you oh, this sounds like a good idea. Nevertheless, we could see the benefit of this space. And this is why I think it's fantastic that Marielle even joined, which is, unfortunately, in this space, we're still not capitalizing on the fact that there are women over here and their voice needs to be heard, because the tradition's only going to know what to do with this treasure trove it has, being women, once they start expressing themselves, and we could see the amount of wisdom, their perspective, how they affect, how they slowly, their ideas permeate through us. But if they're not speaking, and if they're not being, and arguably you could say they've been shut down for years, and the space is too masculine, and it's too, I get that, and we have to do our part of allowing the space to be more comfortable. But kudos to you, Marielle, because you're here. And that's what people need to see. People need to see the thirst, the hunger, the engagement, the know-how, the knowledge, where you're not someone that's standing behind the pews just looking in, singing. You're someone that actively wants to be involved in their development of their relationship with the Creator, and ideally in the redemption of the world. So yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. I just want to say something quick. So Sherry said this, which I think she completely believes this. Men should be afraid of women. They have a lot of power. I think I know exactly what you're saying, Sherry. I think most people are going to hear this in a way that you don't even mean. I almost guarantee.
She means that swimmer, that trans swimmer that's beating everyone right now.
That's exactly what she means.
So powerful.
Well, I hope we're a good place. Like Emily's here, and I mean, listen, we talk about a shadow matriarchy. I don't think anyone shaped the spirit of this corner as much as Sherry Suter has. She, if you've been, for as long as she has, when she comes into the conversations, how she teaches people how to look and to see things. Um, I think let's talk about TLC. Let's jump it out of the church context or whatever. There's a certain element that's being drawn to this that is male, because that's what the Jordan Peterson phenomena is. But when I think about a lot of the women around here, they're absolutely super valuable voices. And one of the reasons why I think they're also super valuable voices, not just for the women that find themselves in the little corner, but I think particularly for some of these young men to to be exposed to the Sophia, right? To be exposed to the feminine, right? I think it's important, if particularly if they're struggling to feel your way. I think some people come in here and they struggle to find social cues and they haven't seen these other things. So, I think it's vitally important, and I'm hopeful. But I'd make the case, like, again, I think I would look to Sherry most notably, but many other women, that we need to hear that, right? And we need to see that side. And I think we do a pretty good job around here of doing that. We can't do it like Marielle. I'd like to ask you a question. One of the problems we do have in this little corner is just by sheer numbers of participants, it's mainly male. So there's very few women, and then a bunch of guys are talking, and Marielle was brave enough to jump on with this bald-headed old guy and this wacko from Minnesota. And Hezzy's nice, and Hezzy's just very nice and put
As
together.
you can see,
He's
I have a weird, ugly old hat on, so.
he's not. Hezzy's not scary at all, but yeah, and Paul does it every time he chants too. Like we need that, because I think it shapes the corner, it shapes our wisdom. It's a perspective that we all need to hear. And I think most notably, when I think about being a guy noticing all these young men here that maybe don't have that, is I want them to be able to see that wisdom too, because we each bring. I think as a man, I have specific things that I can speak to a young man about that only I can speak to a young man about, and there are things that the women can speak into us that only a woman can speak to.
I just want to add one thing to the beautiful thought you shared, Lance, which is in Genesis, when God creates Eve, the term he uses in Hebrew is ezer kenegdo, which the exact translation would be a help against him. And really, that's the early version of opponent processing. Even as men, we're not complete. We don't even see ourselves properly without our counterpart. And in spaces like this, which while very diverse and very open, nevertheless, because we don't get to participate enough, and yes, they're in the comments, and yes, they're in the Discord. I see Muriel's very active in the Discord, but like with regards to having these kind of conversations, seeing your feedback, even like Lance said, even the social, even like the visual cues, that allows us to see ourselves in a better way as well. So again, thank you.
Absolutely. Right. And there's also lots of, see ya, Hezzy. There's lots of, I don't know, like Marielle, we've spoken before, like in the Discord and different things. Cassie's around, Sherry's around, like Shelly is around. She used to be around. I mean, there's lots of great women in the corner. Sarah, a good friend I've known for a long time. But part of it is like, well, and I don't want to out, but like, she's busy with a lot of shit. Like she doesn't have time to sit here on live streams and talk for a long time. Like you were just speaking, like you've got stuff going on with your kids. Like
I have my ears, like my kids are gonna interrupt.
Yes, exactly. And so it's not like, I don't know. It just doesn't have to be to even view the question as like a antagonism rather than like almost like the way in Meditations on the Tarot, he talks about them as antinomies. Like it's not, I would propose this. A lot of it is a problem because you perceive it as a problem. A lot of it has to do with your perception of it, anyone's perception of it. And that's not to excuse misogynistic and manipulative and abusive things done by men in positions of institutional power and authority historically. That's not what I'm talking about. All that stuff is shitty and crappy. I don't know. It's just we have to talk about these things, I think, but very often I think they're just, I don't know, what's the word? I'm searching for a word that's not going to necessarily piss a bunch of people off. Missing the point, or missing the thing behind the thing behind the thing.
It's so hard to have these conversations because there's so much circling around it in culture now, and all this stuff gets baked into it, and there's these trigger words and everything else. It's such a difficult
I think
time.
when it's political, when the conversation is political, which to me is really framed like, and what I mean by political is that it's about power. And when I say it's about power, it's power over versus power for. So not true authority. It's the difference between authority and power, which is what the politic likes to deal in. When the question about women in positions of power is about power over versus power for, it's all the wrong framing, and it's missing the whole, it's missing everything.
Now, I do want to say, and I don't want to make this about Orthodox only, but is what I have in mind with the Orthodox diaconies. I wish that people wouldn't be so quickly to label it as they're trying to be progressive, because I think it goes, way back, and there used to be that role. So I think it's different. And certainly there will be some people that have that intention, but I think on the whole, what I keep hearing is nothing like the progressive ideas or woke ideas, but it is bad timing.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I wish they would have opened this conversation more, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Where it's not so chaotic with the woke ideologies, because they are going to make that connection. So it's really bad timing. But I don't know. I think Callisto's Ware was kind of in favor of a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely, and I think one of the benefits to orthodoxy is how slowly they move. So, like, I think it can save you from maybe getting caught up of a certain cultural swirl and responding to those things and allowing things to have enough time to, be carefully thought out or whatever. And I don't she dropped off. Like, I don't, because I see women chanters, I see women like Eugenia Constantino teaching, actually being given leadership roles of teaching.
There's no problem with women teaching in Orthodoxy, none.
Yeah, so there's all this stuff that's there, and so on its face, I think that's a very fair point, which is she brought up there, which is like, hey, quit being. It doesn't always have to be the Trojan horse. I mean, it has been, and listen, it's happened in every mainline Protestant church, right? So it's to obvious ends that we've seen play out over the past 20 years. So it's hard to separate that in America. Like, it's just like it's very difficult. But I think she makes she's making a very valid and fair point.
Yeah, so I want to affirm her too, and then I probably need to get going. So I'll give you the last word, unless you just want to roll on your own for a while. I completely, I see Marielle's heart very much so, because she's not trying to Trojan horse it at all. And I think there's a very good argument for female deaconesses, and I don't think having a female deacon, it's not it doesn't affect what I think to be the essential symbolism of the priest as Christ. I mean, the whole church is feminine, so it doesn't.
Yeah.
But to her point, like, there's a very good argument for it, and yes, the Orthodox Church would move very slow if it ever moves in that regard. And it is a very unfortunate thing that because of the political nature of the larger world, that question can't be heard without that correspondent fear, which is really, really unfortunate, because it is true. I mean, our church is blessed with actually quite a few deacons, but largely, especially in like mission churches and in smaller Orthodox parishes, the priest is doing everything and is floundering. And I think there would be I mean, I have so many baller ladies at my church that are doing all sorts of stuff that it's just like, that's maybe part of my context as to why I'm, and forgive me if I seemed overly dismissive of things. It's just like the truly political aspect of this conversation, from both sides, pisses me off. I have zero tolerance. I don't even care about it, and I don't want to engage in it.
And I think that largely, we'll just kind of get this wrapped up here, is I think, you know, that's another thing that Paul brought out. Just I think it is, when you think about Orthodoxy in the USA, that and we can look at how it played out in evangelicalism and everything, just, you know, mainly the mainline church or whatever, is we're in this hyper individualized political spirit, power, and your technobabble, like all this stuff is raging around us, and we bring all that stuff in there, and it's a wild time to try and have some of these nuanced conversations divorced from all the milieu we're you know, immersed in.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's close this out. Lance T. Grogan, if you're still here, I replied to you in one of the comments. You can find it on one of my live streams, where you can reach out to me about something that Chad has for you, or you can email Chad at what's your Chad? Do you just put out your? Isn't it just like Chad the Alcoholic at Gmail? I don't know. And that's it, man. We got into a heated topic here, but I think what I am most passionate about is being able to navigate heated topics well and not fall into the typical traps, I think, of like ideological tribalism, you know. And I don't know. I think we did all right.
Thanks for letting me hang with you, Luke. I don't get to talk to you anymore, so I jump on these live streams to spend time with you.
It's always fantastic to see you, Lance. And then are you guys do you know anything about the Kansas City thing? Is that still on?
No, the Symbolic World thing came almost right over the top of the same timing, and there's and I moved to Houston, and just
right.
God, it just worked out exactly the way it was supposed to work out. So I know Jess is thinking about doing something, and some people are doing some things.
All right. I missed that guy too. I messaged him the other day, and I'm like, "You've been absent." And he's like, "Oh, I'll be back." So I need to just reach out. I just call him sometime. All right. Thank you, buddy. Peace out, everyone. That's the end.